Hey, it's Coach Anderson here again from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to start Unit 4. Unit 4 is U.S. becomes a world power. It's going to be America's quest for colonies from 1872 to 1917. When we look at the Great White Fleet, this was a nickname that was given to America's Navy that was constructed in the late 1800s. Because of the efforts of the Secretary of Navy, William McKinley, who later becomes president, and his assistant secretary, who was Theodore Roosevelt. And they were both influenced by a man by the name of Alfred T. Mahan, who had wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And what that book basically said, that every great nation that ever existed in modern times had one thing in common. And what they had in common was the fact that they had a great navy that could patrol their interests, of course, and protect their interests around the world. So when you look at the Great White Fleet, this has a tremendous impact on whether or not the United States of America could create an empire and then find a means, of course, of protecting that empire. This is Alfred T. Mahan. He wrote that influential book, This Influence of Sea Power Upon History, the one, of course, that gave us the Great White Fleet. And there's the name, the Great White Fleet. It really wasn't a Great White Fleet. It was more like a Great Fleet. But they talked about how when they looked at it on the water and how the sun, of course, was shining behind it, it gleamed, and as if it was a sea of great white ships. So the nickname, the Great White Fleet, of course, was born. Alfred T. Mahan. Next, we're going to look at more westward expansion. The focus of American expansion went westward just as the settlement did. A lot of people felt like that the United States of America, when we looked at settlement, of course, the country started on the east coast of the United States of America. So the natural progression, of course, was to go west. In 1867, one of the biggest pieces of westward expansion happened when Secretary of State William H. Seward bought Alaska from Russia. I think it ended up being a little over 2.5 cents an acre at the time that he purchased it. And a lot of people looked at it and thought it was a foolish purchase. They said that they called it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox because who would want polar bears and ice? Because that's what they thought the United States of America was getting. Little do they know that when you look at America today, a large percentage of our oil reserves are in Alaska, and then of course gold is found in Alaska, and then look at all the other natural resources that Alaska of course offers. The first American influence in the Pacific was through the efforts of Commodore Matthew C. Perry. He opened Japan to American trade. Now, Japan was one of those nations that was a little bit reluctant to be involved with other nations around the world. And it rejected a lot of Western ways. And because it was a rejection of a lot of Western ways, it was very difficult for foreign nations to come into Japan, of course, and have any kind of influence there. And it was very tough, but Commodore Matthew C. Perry goes and basically blockades Japan. He takes his ships and he parks them outside in the harbor, of course, in Japan until they eventually, of course, allowed him to come in and set up talks, of course, to create the open door policy for trade. As trade in the Pacific began, the U.S. needed refueling supply stations. Once again, you needed to have a place where you could have refueling stations, of course, for the Navy, so the Navy, of course, could patrol and then protect your interests there. In the late 1870s and 1890s, the United States of America acquired both Samoa and Hawaii. Seward, here's a picture of William Seward, the Secretary of State responsible for the purchase of Alaska. The annexation of Hawaii. The U.S. gained control of Hawaii in the late 1890s, full control in the 1890s, and primarily through the efforts of a man by the name of Sanford Dole, who was a prominent sugar planter in the region. His efforts, along with the United States of America's government, made it possible for the Queen of Hawaii, of course, to be overthrown. And by overthrowing the Queen of Hawaii, the United States of America then installs Sanford Dole, of course, as the governor of Hawaii. And eventually, of course, Hawaii is one of those territories that becomes the 50th state of the United States of America. On the left, you see a picture of Sanford Dole. Yes, the same guy that you might be thinking about. It is from Dole Pineapple and Dole Sugar. And then Queen Liliuokalani, who was the last queen, of course, of Hawaii. All right, we're going to start with lesson focus questions. We told you that when we went over these focus questions in the beginning, these are the questions that should guide your thought process as we go over this particular lesson. The first question is, how did the United States of America become a world power? Why did it, and number two, why did the Pacific region, why was the Pacific region a natural answer for the United States' search for new markets for American industrial products? We'll give you a few moments and let you have a peek at those. And then write an answer. And remember, your answer, of course, doesn't have to look like my answer, but do the best that you can, and we'll go back and see what we can come up with. All right, we should have had enough time that we were able, of course, to go through and look at both of those questions. These were the answers that I came up with, and yours, once again, don't have to necessarily be like mine. It could be something, of course, a little bit different, and you could have a different perspective than me. This is how the United States of America become a world power, the military and economic competition from Europe, and the belief that the United States was culturally superior and had the responsibility to civilize the parts of the world less fortunate, influenced the U.S. to assert its influence throughout the Pacific. So it was a Christian thing for us to do, but also, of course, it gave us an opportunity, of course, to make a little money, of course, in the sale of American products and exert our influence around the rest of the world. Why was the Pacific region the natural answer for the United States' search for new markets for American industrial products? The U.S. had always looked west. So it became the natural thing for us to do. And one of the biggest issues was the fact that the Pacific region was only one of the few regions that was still open for colonization. If you look at Africa, Africa had pretty much been taken over by the European countries. So when you look at what was available is what you would see, of course, in the Pacific and the South Pacific. Here we're going to give you a few of the map questions that you may see, of course, on the map test. These practice questions, of course, you should probably pay attention to them as best you can. And if you can't, write them down, of course, and put them in your journal. That way you can go back and look at them. And when the map test does happen, maybe you can have a little bit of a test bank you can go back and kind of study with. It says use the excerpt below to answer the question. And the excerpt states, but today we are raising more than we can consume, making more than we can use. Therefore, we must find new markets for our produce. The March of the Flag, Senator Albert Beveridge, 1898. He was one of those pro-imperialism, pro-colonization senators from the United States of America. Which statement supports the concern in the excerpt? Market expansion need to keep industry going. Commercial agriculture is unable to meet the demands of the global market. Rapid industrialization causes economic markets to expand too quickly. Or D, increased inflation causes instability in foreign economic markets. Once again, think about what we've talked about and the things that we've gone over, and formulate your own answer. The answer is market expansion is needed to keep the industry going. In other words, we needed places where we could sell American products, particularly places that we could sell them without having to pay tariffs or taxes. The next question, practice question based on the excerpt, which change influenced U.S. expansion in the Pacific Ocean? The necessities of modern commerce require adequate support, both for our steam naval vessels, which are helpless without refueling stations for repairs, and supplies for our commercial markets in case of danger. Reasons for annexation of Hawaii from the New York Times. So, question. Which influenced U.S. expansion in the Pacific Ocean? A, the invention of the wireless telegraph. B, the negotiation of military alliance. C, the expansion of nationalist movements. D, improvements in sea transportation. Once again, give it a moment or so, of course, to formulate an answer. And the answer is improvements in sea transportation, particularly the Great White Fleet. That's the end of lesson 1. What we hope that you'll be able to find about this particular lesson is why the United States of America engaged in imperialism. Make your own judgments, of course, in terms of whether or not you think it was a good or a bad thing. And once again, as we always tell you, please don't take my word for it. Go through and do your own research, because remember, it's America's history. And because it's America's history, it's your history.